Hi, I'm Matt Barry. I'm an independent filmmaker, and this is Low Budget Visions, where we celebrate personal DIY independent film. And I am beyond excited to be joined tonight by my good friend and longtime collaborator,
Yes.
Jim Gisriel.
Hi. Thanks for having me on, Matt.
Good thing. I want to tell everybody real quick how we know each other and a little bit about our uh, collaborations together. You contacted me. I don't know if you remember this, but it would have
I
been
do.
17 years ago now. I had just
Wow.
made a short film in film school, The Dinner Engagement, had it on my YouTube channel. And I think you were looking up, if I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were telling me that you were looking up Towson short films, student films or something. And I think that's how you
Yes.
found it. Yeah.
Yes.
And you contacted me about it. And we started corresponding. And then at that time you were doing well, we can talk about your animation work that you were doing at that time, but yeah, I think that was when you were still doing the animated series on YouTube. I remember we met up one night in Towson. We grabbed pizza and talked, and then I think it was about, I don't know, 6 months after that I had moved to New York, and then we started working on films together in person and hanging out a lot. And yeah, here we are. That would have been 15 years ago that we uh,
Wow.
we were hanging out in New York when I first moved there, and
Yeah.
the time flies. But I'm really glad that you could be on here tonight. It's always great to catch up with you, and I'm especially excited tonight because you've got a new film, a short film, animated
Yes.
film, Phone Bugging, which we're going to talk about. But I wanted to say before we started recording, you heard me counting off, and I think you heard me count the number 12. And what I was counting was the number of films we've collaborated on.
Oh,
That,
that's what
that,
it
that
is.
that's the
Wow.
12, yeah. From The Wolfman in New York back in 2010 to I guess the most recent one would have been Forbidden Frames in 2022.
Yes.
And then you did a little voiceover for me in another project, which I don't think made the final cut, but it was,
That's true.
I think it's technically 12 or 13 here based on my count. But we've had quite a
Wow.
few collaborations, some uh, bigger than others. Sometimes it's been little voiceover cameos here and there. Other times it's been leading roles, like in The Scam, which you were in.
All right.
So
Gosh, there's so
time has
many.
flown. Yes,
I
but
kind of
yeah.
today was having trouble. It's like, wait, how many is it? Like, there's some that really stick out. And then when I was going through your YouTube channel, I was a little like, oh, right, that one. Oh, I did a voice for this.
Right.
Oh, during this period, we did a few of them. And then there'd be some years like we didn't. And then there's like even unreleased stuff we've done together. Like we've just done a lot. But yeah, to go back to your thing about how we met, I was when YouTube started and was very small, which doesn't seem like a thing now, but I was very interested because when I was in high school, took Tufts University film classes, which actually, funny story, you're the one who told me I'd taken all the film classes but one. No one had told me that because you were like, why didn't you take the last class? I'm like, what are you talking about? And you were like, you took the whole film program. And I was like, what? Like I didn't know until you told me in a restaurant in 2015, maybe. And I was like, told my mom, I was like, did you know we did the whole film program? And she was like, why didn't we? They didn't tell us. So I had done anyway. When I was a teenager, I was allowed, for some reason, Tufts University allowed me to take film classes because I was right down the street there. I lived right near there. So I was fascinated by Tufts University because I was a kid and I always wanted to see what other films were and what had happened to it because after I went there, just for the few classes and hung out there and stuff, I was just really interested and I found your stuff and it was very like I did not watch these in preparation. Now I wish I had, but they were like kind of very silent film comedy influence and stuff. And this is like even pre I'm gonna say a dreaded movie, I guess, The Artist. Like it wasn't cool to do this. No offense or anything, but it wasn't cool at the time. But to me, like that was extra cool because I was like, this is silent film, and I love silent film, and I was like really intrigued. And I was just kind of like, then it felt, I don't know, you're probably the first YouTube friend I ever had because I didn't have any other I met through YouTube buddies. Even though we're both from Maryland, I don't think we ever met when I lived there, which is bizarre.
No, no.
My parents, for some reason, now think we did. So if you ask them, we did. But ever because they're like, you went to high school with them. I'm like, no, I don't. Unless
No,
this,
I
there's a
was up in Hartford. I grew up in Hartford County, so I don't think we would have, it's
no,
possible we're at some, who knows, maybe at one time or another, some film screening we unknowingly crossed paths. But no, I don't. I really think it was through
yeah.
YouTube. Yeah, that you
There's
contacted me. Yeah,
there was probably one time at the Charles we walked by each other
yeah, yeah.
in the biopic that is this and
Right.
somewhere. But yeah, it was I just liked Matt Shorts. It was they were cool stuff, and I thought you'd be cool to work with. Well, I both work with and just meet up with, and I didn't have other than um I didn't know many film people in Towson who were even my age, other than well, I guess Chris LaMartina, who I'm not best friends with, but no, well, I guess, well, new, I don't know. And uh, I don't know, I was fascinated, I guess. I was fascinated by it. And so I wanted to meet up with you, I guess, because of that.
It was interesting, talking about those kind of early days of YouTube because it seemed a lot smaller then in the sense that it wasn't this vast, overwhelming, you know, archive
No,
of videos. And if you were into like if you were looking for one particular thing, you could actually see a lot of that particular thing on YouTube. If you were looking for short films, you could actually see like a decent percentage of the short films that have been uploaded to YouTube. So yeah, you could find things like that regional, if you're searching by region or by city or whatever. And so yeah, it was nice to be able to meet up with people and it was especially nice to talk with you. I remember the night we were at Jerry Subs and Pizza in Towson, I think. And it was
yeah,
right around Christmas of 2008, and I remember you were telling me about the work that you were doing and kind of the indie film scene in New York. And it was nice because I hadn't really connected with too many people here in Baltimore at that time who were really into what I was doing. And so it was nice to hear from you and hear about your interest in my work.
yeah. I mean, especially then, well, it's good work, so there's a reason to be interested. But I will say, growing up in Maryland, there aren't many of us film people who are really into it. I feel like that's how we all because most people were, I don't know, just sort of bored by it. So I think that's how we all kind of find each other because we're all like, "Oh, you are really into it." And
Right,
it
right.
feels weird to say now, but it's like, it was hard to talk to people about movies
Yeah,
there
it was hard
then.
to find people. That's the thing. I mean, unless you were at certain, well, I guess like unless you were in a film school
Yeah.
or regularly going to certain screenings or whatever. Yeah, it was kind of hard. I mean, whereas with the internet now, it's a lot easier to find. But of course, like I also said, the internet and YouTube in particular, seemed like a little smaller than I think. So there was a little bit more sense of, the idea that you could go out there and connect with somebody. And then of course at that time, I want to let you talk more about this, but you were working on the Knock Force cartoons at that
Yes.
time through YouTube. And do you want to talk a little bit about, actually, that might be kind of a good place to start here as a lead up to
Yeah,
talking
sure.
about phone bugging. Do you want to talk a little bit about your background in animation and all of that, and also, how you promoted those animations at that time?
Oh, okay. I that is something to do how I promote them now, actually. But I I guess with me in animation, I went to film school at School of Visual Arts. I did not, despite what some may say or anything, I did not go to school for animation. However, I had a roommate who's an animator who him and I would go on to create my first internet cartoon pre-YouTube called Cletus the Fetus, which is very just very early 2000s and inappropriate. Um, but I kind of through making that cartoon and through hanging out with the animators, um, I don't want to be a jerk and act like my other fellow film students were idiots or not as interested in broader topics. But when I hung out with the animators, they would listen to me talk about older movies and talk about different kinds of movies. And uh being experimental, and Adult Swim was just breaking out, and like I think that was the my freshman year was the same year as Spirit Away came out, and I was obsessed. I mean, that's such a great movie. And the ones who would talk to me about it were the animators, not the film people. Were like, well, that's a cartoon. And to me, I guess I never kind of gave up animation the way most people do, especially then. Now it's a little more common, but then partly because I grew up going to a lot of comic book stores, and I was like, okay, well, now that I'm done with this cartoon, I'm this age, so I go to this cartoon, which now is normal. Then was not. That this is dork nerd stuff. And because of that, I always had animation I was interested in, and I could meet up with animators, and I got to learn lip sync, which is the only real animation thing I'm good at, and which I was self-taught. But through talented animators, I was very lucky. Zero was a good animator. He's gone on. I don't think he's as well known to most people, but when I did Knock Force with Ian Jones Cordy, he went on to make OKKO. He created that for Cartoon Network and worked on Adventure Time, and Steve and him and his wife Rebecca Sugar, who I also she kind of worked on Knock Force. Um, or yeah, she did. She was like the third member almost. We all worked together on that, and I was lucky enough to be sort of trained by these, probably of my graduating class, some of the most talented people, film and storytelling wise. I was really lucky. Um, so my education with animation is really haphazard, and like I took a class, only one animation class, from this guy Don Duga, who designed Frosty the Snowman, the animated special. He designed Frosty the Snowman. I don't know if he's still alive, but so I was lucky to get taught by those people. And it gave me confidence because none of them were like, yo, you suck. They were all like, you actually know how to do lip sync, which is like my one. If you watch my new stuff, you can tell it's my one skill because it's the only thing. I'm not a really good artist at all. And so I kind of picked it up from those experiences. And Ian and I made Knock Force right out of college, which was mostly because we wanted to work on a project, and neither of us were getting film work or getting short film, haphazardly. And so we were kind of hungry, and I'm glad we did it. It premiered literally the year after we graduated, to like almost to the day after we graduated school. Knock Force came out, which is probably too soon. I think if there's a lot of things around that era, I was like, you may maybe slow down, bro. I think you're going a little too fast. But we did it, and we promoted. We had stickers that are still up. So vinyl stickers do work. That was 20, the cartoon lasted from 2007 to 2009. And I know there's a Royal Farms in Towson, Maryland that still has that sticker. I know there's some in Towson still up. I don't know how many, but I know the Royal Farms one's there. I have some pride in that because that was my, for any Maryland Watch viewers, that was my Royal Farm. So I have a, it represents something to me. Probably no one else who sees that sticker on a daily basis, but
Now I'm going to have to go look for it.
it's the one on York Road, right around like Stoneleigh.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
okay. Yeah.
yeah, that one. It's on the pole, like right where you drive it. Anyway, anytime I'm there, we have to go, and it's still there. But yeah, it was an extreme learning experience, but I'm kind of glad I can say I got to work with those people. I think there's a lot of pride in the fact that I got to work with some amazing animators, and also that the legacy of that cartoon, especially Knock Force, like just never, as much as I tell people, some people think I'm being silly. I'm like, it really doesn't go away, that cartoon. Like we did the Toonrific, Tariq did a documentary on animation and hip hop, and we were in that. But we kind of reunited for that. And then recently, I don't know if you know what this is, but maybe somebody watching will. But there's this thing when Cartoon Network Studios shut down, they had this legendary staircase that had graffiti in it. And Knock Force, I think, had two stickers up. And I know Ian probably put those up, but the fact that Knock Force can be even a part of that is because people were messaging me, and I was like, oh my God, I'm part of this little thing or that little thing, or it got referenced here, or this person's Twitter name is a Knock Force reference. It's just like, and I never know when it's going to happen. So I'm happy to have had that. And I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no,
But
it's
yeah,
cool. It's great to hear the legacy that it's had,
yeah,
how it's really lasted for you. And
yeah,
that was, that I mean, when we first connected, that's what you were working on at that time. Um, Now, of course, I think anybody watching this who knows you is familiar with your YouTube channel, doing
yeah.
movie reviews. I don't know if we can certainly talk a bit about that if you'd like. I know you started doing those, I believe, in was that around 2009?
You were right. You were right. Wow,
Yeah.
you got that right.
Well, I remember one
Yes.
of your first ones I watched, which I really enjoyed. It was the review of the Oklahoma Kid with James Cagney, and
Yes.
this is interesting. This is an interesting approach to doing a movie review. So I do remember when you, I think, started posting those. I think that was one
Uh,
of the first ones I saw, at least.
I actually remember you liking that, and knowing you liked it gave me some confidence, because I was like, maybe I went too far. Because yeah, Oklahoma Kid's like a James Cagney Western, and people always give him kind of shit for it, but I think my main thing was, I don't know, my main thing was that Humphrey Bogart was a jerk on set. That was like kind of my main point of the review, but it was early, and I don't think I would review it that way now and have a skit in it, but it was fun because I was like trying to translate 40s humor to James Cagney and Humphrey Bogart. But yeah, wow, I remember that one. But yeah, doing the reviews has been amazing. I love doing the reviews. It's become more of a, I guess, a business. Not, I can't quit my job, but much more lately. But I don't know. I feel like I've learned more about film through having to watch movies and being either forced to new releases, or the movie review vote I have, or a series I'm doing. I feel like that's been a better educational resource, because when you're just forced to watch movies, like any kind of movie, like if you have your own choice,
Mm.
you're never going to get outside a certain lane. And I'm kind of grateful, and I know people have different opinions on this artistically, but I'm actually grateful to be forced into these things, because sometimes I confront things that change how I view film, for sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. I do get to review movies I like, I'm not, or want to see, but if you're doing any sort of criticism, you're sort of forced to see the big movie, or the best picture winner, or a foreign film that has a lot of buzz. And I've often thought, if I didn't do the reviews, I probably wouldn't see some of these movies. And I kind of, that makes me sad, because I like having the thoughts of it, even like the bad ones, or the conversation of, like, just this past year, the conversation of, this might sound very basic, but of with Oppenheimer and Godzilla minus one, like having those two in the same year. It's like, how did that happen? That's insane. And it wasn't on purpose. I mean, both of them obviously were in production, didn't know about it. Maybe they were aware, but they couldn't answer one another in that time frame. Or even Skinamarink this past year, or I don't know, so many things that I don't know. It is, I don't know if people, because film, how people view film has changed a lot since I started to now. But there used to be a thing back in, this sounds pathetic, but back in the old days, they would really say in film school, like, just go pick out a movie, any movie, even like, and I kind of have that a lot with it, and it's really taught me a lot about film. Like, I don't think I knew very much about horror when I started, and obviously I did every William Wellman movie, which I'm immensely proud of, and I'm probably just ranting at this point. But I don't know, just, yeah, it's been my longest series. I've made so many thousands of reviews, and it's I don't know. I'm happy about it, but I almost do it so much, I'm like, I don't know exactly what my life would be without it, but anytime I think about giving it up, I'm like, but I don't like that idea. That sounds worse, to to just like, what do I do, just exist? Like, that sounds horrible. Like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. Maybe that's how I feel creatively. It's like, I'd much rather create than not creating sounds like death. But anyway, sorry, that was maybe extreme, but maybe
I
not.
I, I know what you mean. It's do you find that with the movie reviews that it informed? I mean, it seems to me that it informed the approach you took with this phone bugging film. I mean, the idea, the act of watching a movie, the act of kind of thinking about it, and sometimes all the thoughts that come to mind when we're watching movies and thinking
Yeah.
about all the different pieces.
Well, that was more, I think one of the things with film watching now is if you watch movies at home, your phone's like right there, and you have this tendency. Man, I used it at Night of the Living Dead mostly because it's public domain, but also I know like most of what they talk about in that film, where the phone's like talking about other George Romero films, talking about how the actor was in Ganja and Hess, which is a classic vampire 70s film, uh, and all the other things they do. And that is some of my worst tendencies when I'm watching a movie is I'll be reminded of, oh, this person was in this film with that person. Okay, well, I should look. What this is just going to bug me. And then I noticed I'm like, wait, 15, what I just missed. I want to experience the movie. I'm just looking at, and sometimes it's happened to me before where I'll just throw the phone on somewhere on the couch just to avoid, because my brain will just go into, he was in Ganja and Hess. Who directed Ganja and Hess? What else did they make? Oh, they did that. Oh, that's interesting. Didn't Spike Lee do a remake of Ganja and Hess that nobody liked? But I don't know. I like Spike Lee. Maybe it was good. And then I'll like think, didn't this person review it? What happened to that critic? Is that is that critic on Twitter? Do I follow them? Oh my God, they're still tweeting. That's an interesting take. Uh, what did they think of? Sorry. I could do this all day, the bounce, but I think most film people can. They're like, oh, I don't know. I'm sure like they said this about Vincent Canby. I don't know if I agree with that. What about how do they feel about Kale? It just my brain will just go in these loops and loops. And so it's a lot about that. And how I almost feel one of the things that I think is the biggest advertisement for theatrical. Even if I'm seeing, like, I had a great experience watching the latest Ghostbusters, which is not a great movie, but it was just like I had a great seat. I got a theater that was way bigger than it should have been for what I paid for. Um, but I was also like, I don't have my phone on. Like, I don't have to be bothered by life. I don't have to know if the world ended yet. I don't have to hear about world events or have my mind go racing all over the internet. And it's like there's still something I love about that. And I think that's part of what I'm talking about is I don't even like watching movies at home, or I've tried to watch them in breaks like during my lunch break, and even that I don't like because it just feels, I don't know. It's very hard to just be able to sit down and watch a movie nowadays because it's a continuous hour and a half. And I feel like our attention spans are almost set for television in a sense, which is makes me
Yeah.
sad because I don't know. Yeah, it's just a thing, and I notice other people have that issue where like I'll be watching something and my wife will be on her phone or someone else will be watching it, and because it's slow, they're like, "Well, here's my opportunity to check Instagram," and I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I think the thing is when I see people in the theater check their phones, it's just their calendar or their email, which to me is like that sounds horrible. Like, why would I ever? Even Ghostbusters. Five, I would much rather watch than check my email. Like I mean, I don't know. I do know there's sometimes, which is a real thing, if you have a new baby and you see a movie, you do keep your phone on, and those are the only exception. But everyone else, you can. I don't know. I wanted to talk about a thing that I think most people are doing, and that's the point of the series is to sort of be a film education cartoon because I like doing film education. You've helped me do some film education because I think you worked on before that my what is auteur theory video, correct?
Yeah,
Am I wrong about that?
we've had a couple of conversations, I think, on your channel. Maybe helped out with some research here and there on a couple of them. Yeah, I've enjoyed that. I have to say it's interesting. Something about you bringing this up. Something I find interesting about phone bugging is how it's dealing with this issue of the distraction of the cell phone, which we hear so
Yeah.
much about when it comes to movie watching. But I think it's getting at a particular aspect of it that is
Mhm.
it's not just the distraction of the phone, to go check social media so much. It's the distraction of when our minds are constantly thinking about what we're watching, and to that point where we almost have a hard time. And I think this is true for a lot of people who are kind of deep into thinking about films as well as watching them. we sometimes have a hard time shutting that part of our brain off when we watch a movie, and we find ourselves kind of going into analysis mode or historian mode or whatever. And it can be hard to just kind of shut that out and, yeah, focus on the movie.
Oh yeah, 100. I
Yeah.
would say it's very hard. I sometimes think a great filmmaker or a great film, and well, usually great films are made by great filmmakers, can make me not think about the process of what's going on. Like I can't. I've heard people say when I was in film school they hate that they now think about how they had to cut to, the close up was a different setup and how did they do that and stuff. Sometimes I think that's amazing when you watch a film and you're like, wait, how did they cut to this to that? Like that's so many different cameras, but it is a hard thing to shut off because you once you're aware of it, you can't. It's like a Pandora's box or something. You really can't
Yeah.
shut it. Like even if I watch a sitcom, I think about, oh well, the kids in the show can only work so many hours. So that's why they're like, we're gonna go to our rooms, mom, and then they'll have a parents will have a 5 minute scene. Like, you become so hyper aware. But I think there's a certain, it's not sad, but I think you have to, it is sad that we are like that. Sorry, but you have to, I think a lot of life when you get older is, there's so many, especially, I have kids and stuff. You're always thinking about something, but I think you have to be open to experience things. And I think the phone makes it hard. The phone makes you want to just experience the phone all the time. And that's not, I don't know if I love that experience all the time. I think I would much rather watch Night of the Living Dead for the 800th time than check out how many movies George Romero made. No offense to him or anything. He has a great, you know, but
It's funny because I don't necessarily have the problem that I guess a lot of people describe of getting distracted. If I'm watching something at home, I can usually focus pretty well on it as opposed to getting, picking up the phone just to pick it up. I mean,
mhm.
but I just find with watching things at home that there's so many external distractions. Even if you're perfectly concentrated, there's going to be things, oh, the laundry needs to be changed, or I have to remember to start the dishwasher, things like that. Like like on a Sunday night, there's a lot of times I'll watch a movie, but I find myself having to pause it, oh, the laundry needs to be changed over or whatever, and things like that. uh it does it breaks the experience. I mean, it's your
Oh
concentration,
yeah,
the whole experience. So I think we're kind of on the same page that seeing movies in a theater is, the ultimate way, well, hopefully, ideally, I
yeah.
guess, to
I
be able
mean,
to shut out any distractions. Hopefully there's no one else there who's going to distract you, but
well, yeah, that's I
that's
mean,
that's another conversation.
that could be a problem too. But
Yeah.
I also think it's like, I don't know I look at it almost like when you watch a lot of movies, it's it's almost like if you drive a car more, you have more chance of getting in a car accident. It's
Mhm.
like the more times you watch movies, the more, and as much as like, we're like cinephiles. I would say we're both cinephiles. It's like you
Mhm.
want to watch all these movies, you can watch one movie a night and it might work out for you. But when you're like, okay, well, I want to watch a movie every night and I want to try to, I want to catch up. So I'll watch a half hour here, I'll watch a part here. And I think that then you get into it's hard to keep up with it all and be able to shut everything out because it makes it, I don't know. I like to grow my film knowledge all the time, but it's also hard to do that in both being an adult and this chaotic world. And I think the phone, part of, I don't know, part of me talking about that was to talk about specifically the phone, but I feel that all the time where like, I think I was just having something on like just a show while I was just saving files because I wanted to have something on. And I felt bad I wasn't experiencing it because I was like, I actually liked the writing, I like the animation, and I actually put on a show that I was like, I care less about because I was like, so I don't know. Part of me thinks I wish there was more media literacy, and part of that is understanding what shows are good for calming down, what shows are good for folding laundry, like sometimes if I have to fold laundry, I'll put on a really dumb movie that I've sort of heard things about, but I don't care that much about, or things, or I'll just put on a dumb sitcom I used to like, or put on Pluto, or too much Mystery Science Theater or something like that. So but it is hard to shut everything out and fully experience stuff because there's just too much going on, and
Yeah.
especially if you want to watch the amount of movies we've both watched, I think especially when you're old. I mean, I don't know about you, but I felt like I used to watch a lot more movies. It's like a lot harder now.
Well, a
Um,
couple of things have changed for me. One, and it's interesting. I want to mention first a movie you had recommended to me a while back, Skinamarink. I
yeah.
watched that on Blu-ray. I missed it in theaters, and I really I enjoyed it. I mean, a very interesting film, but I actually felt like was missing so much of the experience watching it the way that I was, watching it
Mhm.
on the TV with as I was saying, like the external just distractions of a Sunday night or whatever,
Mhm.
because it's such an atmospheric movie, and I feel like
It,
you really would need to almost go into a kind of. I can imagine watching it in the theater and going on to almost like a kind of trance-like state
yeah.
watching it because
That
the pacing is so deliberate and it's
mhm.
so leaves so much to the imagination. And I felt like I was really missing it. Like I wasn't giving it a fair chance watching it this way.
So almost everyone I've heard this a lot actually for this film. I I mean it worked out for me on my just on my laptop because I hadn't read a full review, but I heard from other critics like if anything, if there's any movie to make sure your kids never see, it's this one. Uh and so I was watching my laptop. It was in a corner. So even if they walked in suddenly, there was no imagery that they'd be like, I didn't want them to tell me when they're 20, what's haunted me forever. So I was very conscious, but also my son who was one would just the kids will suddenly just like yell, like wake up, scream, and then go back to sleep. And he did that a few times. And I have to hand it to him. It really added to the atmosphere. Uh, because it scared that movie does not have jump scares, but for me it did. But the atmosphere worked. I mean I had headphones on. I was like I had the lights down. It was perfect. But I've heard that with that one. That one you can't do laundry. If you do that, actually reminds me of what happened to the Blair Witch, because that movie I actually have I told you about my Blair Witch thing before? Have
I
I
don't recall.
Okay, so I saw the Blair. I when I actually this ties into Towson. When I took my first Towson University class, summer of '99. A kid came in and he's like, "Do you want to see this movie? It's called The Blair Witch. It's an early screening." Which now I agree sounds like it's not a real thing. It's like a thing in a biopic, but this really happened. And I saw it weeks before it hit, and I was like, "That's a really atmospheric, weird." Indie horror movie, and like I was really in it in the theater, and like everyone was mostly there were a few drunks actually, but it was I mostly got into it. And I remember seeing that film because when I after a few weeks I knew friends who wanted to see the Blair Witch Project. It was a hot movie that summer, and it was at this was okay, the first one was at the Charles, which is the Charles is a great theater. This was when it was the Charles, and then the next one was at the General Cinemas in Towson Commons, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
then they had football commercials before, and I was like, this is not the same experience. And then it got even worse because it got on VHS right around Halloween, and I knew people who were like, when I was a teenager, and be like, we're having a Halloween party and we're gonna watch the Blair Witch Project, and I was like, don't do that. Like, don't. That's not the movie for it. And I think why people hated because there was a couple years people did not like that movie, the general public, and I think it's because they sort of watched it incorrectly. I mean, it was never meant to blow up the way it did. That was sort of
Yeah.
an accident. But I do think about that with certain movies, like if I'm watching it and I notice this needs to be experienced, or Zone of Interest, actually, that's a great recent example. When my wife and I watched that, we made sure like we were not too sleepy because it's like an like that's the one thing about art stuff. I mean, I have two kids, so I mean, I could take a nap right now if you want me to, but it's like I can take a nap anytime. It's not easy, it's not hard for me, but we had to make sure we were like ready to fully experience this. And I don't know, it does feel like you do need to be in the right mode. You do need to really experience. I've heard that with Zone of Interest as well, actually, that it was better to experience in the theater because there were no distractions. We were lucky when we watched at home. Everybody didn't wake up in the middle of the night. And not that I don't think that would scare them unless they're like, what's that noise in the background? Or people. No, but I do. Yes, I think there are certain films the atmosphere matters. Sorry, I went on a long Blair Witch rant. I hope that
No, no,
connected.
it's interesting because what it comes down to for me is that there's a lot of discussion, of course, about watching movies at home and watching movies in theaters, but I do think that for people like ourselves who see so many, there are, I guess, different levels of distraction that can come into play. I mean, we talked about, of course, just external things, but also to get back to your film phone bugging, just how much of it is the our own minds kind of processing what we're watching. And I became aware of this. I forget, it was probably within the last few years. I was
Mhm.
thinking back to something when I first started reading, books about movies when I was
Mhm.
a kid. There was a series of books about, um, it was put out by the BFI, I believe. It was like movies of the 30s, movies of the 40s, movies of the 50s.
Mhm.
And these were books I would get through the public library. And one of the things they would do is highlight key films from that decade. They would have like a breakdown of the shots, the cast and crew information. So like a little dedicated section to some of the key films. And what I remember was as I was discovering those movies for the first time through the books, this might be the
Mhm.
first time I had heard about them, or certainly the first time I was reading anything in depth about them. They that I found at that age, and I guess just having that level of experience with movies, being a beginner or whatever, it was easier for me to think of them as standalone movies. Whereas now, when I watch them, or I mean, when I read about them,
Oh.
my mind is instantly going in a million. It's like I'm visualizing this one movie, but as part of this huge tapestry of film history. And so I'll give an example. Is in the movies of the '50s book, they have a section on The Searchers, the John Ford film. And at the time, I remember looking at it and being, really taken by the color of the images from the frame blowups they include, and reading about the film and everything. And it seemed like, okay, this is like a standalone movie. It's being singled out in this book. But now, if I hear The Searchers, I'm instantly plugging this into the context of John Ford's career, of the Western as a genre, of John Wayne's career. I'm thinking about it in terms of '50s cinema, the evolution of the Western genre, where it fits, it's just you can't help it, but your mind just starts going a mile a minute trying to plug it into all these different. It's like a matrix,
Yes.
trying to like plug it into all these different components that it's a part of. And so it becomes very hard for me to think of The Searchers simply as a movie. It's a John Ford film. It's starring John Wayne. It's a Western. It's a '50s Western. It's this, it's that. And it just starts to, even in the context of being a studio picture versus like an independent production made for release by a studio, your mind just starts going into all these, dozens and dozens of different facets. And again, it makes it sometimes hard just to kind of step back and, just take it on its own terms.
No, that's a great example, actually, The Searchers, because when when I first saw that, I'm actually of the mind that, because for a long time they'd be like, "Oh, you never seen a Western? See The Searchers," and I'm always like, "Don't do that. Don't do that." You should, because I saw it first and I didn't get it. Other than, well, actually, I have shown it to people, but it was mainly to explain that, because people are like, I think I watched Star Wars with someone, and I said, "Oh, the when Luke finds his aunt and uncle, that's from The Searchers," and they're like, "What do you?" And so I actually watched it actually with I think they've said this, but Ian and Rebecca, who worked on Knockforce with me, I literally watched it, and they asked me to explain like all the ways it influenced culture later and stuff, and like it was like being asked to talk over a movie basically. But I don't like when people show that first, because I saw that during when AFI did the top 100 in '98, and I saw it because it was Spielberg was like, "This is such a great movie," and I didn't know John. My dad was not a big Western guy. I hadn't seen Stagecoach. I didn't know much. It was like maybe my first John Ford movie, and that is the worst way to do that movie, because then I watched a bunch of John Ford and I rewatched it. I was like, "This movie's genius. This is like the greatest Western of all time," and I that is a movie that you need the context for. I do think there are actually pieces of art. It's like The Searchers and The Watchmen graphic, well, now it's a graphic novel, but comic series. um I think both, you need that context, because otherwise it's like I'm sure they're good, but you don't, they're in conversation. Like one of the things, like to even tie this to phone bugging is I think when people talk about criticism, they think of people just doing a review, which it is, but there's also forms of film and art that are criticism. And The Searchers is criticism, and how John Ford, I think, felt about. I mean, there's been books, and I haven't seen The Search in a while, so I'm very much fair, simplifying this, but felt about the Western and felt about the idea of John Wayne's uh, persona that he had helped cultivate, that he had made John Wayne into a American icon, and then he makes The Searchers, which is like insane. Like how who does that? Like who makes, you never see that happen even now to the degree in which they turn that on its head. And it's very, very smart. It's very well made. It does work, I think, as a simple revenge thing, but I think you're missing a huge part of what John Ford was telling. I also think him and a lot of those older studio directors were trying to experiment at that time. And I mean, I know Wellman, who I know, obviously I'm going to say Wellman because I know him so well, but I think what Ford succeeded in that was he, I don't know, I get a level of his own criticism of his own, what he had done, basically, of his own style. And to me, if like you don't know that, like it's sort of silly to watch it. Like you should, I think they should show them Stagecoach or Fort Apache, or that's what I would do first. But we've had believe it or not, anyone who's listening, Jim and Matt have had many film history should be taught in a different way
Right.
conversations.
Yeah.
That could be a whole podcast about that. But The Searchers, that is, yeah, that is. I do think about that, or even a film I like, Public Enemy.
Hmm.
You can watch that outside of it, but there's a couple levels where I think I saw a Wellman thing. Sorry to bring this back to Wellman. That's what I do, I guess. But I didn't recognize, because it's so much older, that it has such a bigger budget than Little Caesar, because Little Caesar is the gangster movie of its era. If you because when I finally saw Little Caesar, I was sort of disappointed because I was like, this isn't anything like Public Enemy. But what I should have thought is, well, Wellman did Wings, and Wings was a huge hit, and he can go to the studio and demand all this money, and that's why Public Enemy was this monster hit and what it was, and then even what it represents with Cagney, because that was, that's 30, was it 31? It's like right when sound film comes in. Everyone's just talking, and the singing in the rain thing, everyone's talking into the mic, and Cagney's a loose cannon who's like walking all over the place. And even like when Scorsese made The Aviator, he showed that film to show what Howard Hughes was up against, because Scorsese is a big Wellman guy. And he played it, and I think I'm not sure who said this, but someone in the audience said when Cagney walked in, and as Cagney said, they said modern film acting was born, and I 100% believe that. But it's like a film that I loved it just because it was a good story. It was a good film. But now when I watch it, I think of Cagney's taken off, what this does for gangster movies, what it represents for what Scorsese would even do with Goodfellas. I don't think Goodfellas would happen without Public Enemy. I don't think, and then my brain goes insane because I'm just like this wouldn't have happened. Oh my God, they almost casted it differently. How would that work? And like the acting, anyway, it or like how his older brother has those sunken eye things, which is very much silent era, and Cagney represents the new style. So their acting styles are literally butting heads with one another. Like anyway, and the blowing bubbles thing, and the music changes throughout blowing bubbles, and then it was sorry. If you see, there's an episode of The Sopranos where I think it's when his mom dies, where he keeps watching Public Enemy. So already it's a great episode for me. But at the end of the episode, because if you watch Public Enemy, they keep playing different versions of the song Blowing Bubbles in different styles based on when time changes, basically. That's like part of which I think is amazingly smart for that era. Like a really thematic, like really smart way to use a song and show how the era has changed. But at the end of that Sopranos episode, they play a new version of Blowing Bubbles, and I was like, all right, that's the best. That's great. That's great. Anyway,
I mean,
sorry.
that's all these different directions that our minds go, and that
Yeah.
I think you yeah, I think you capture some of that kind of almost chaotic kind of energy with Phone Buggin as far as
Yeah.
that temptation to read up about what else was this actor in, even at that basic level. And of course, the phone has facilitated that to an even greater degree.
Yes.
And I realize, of course, we've been talking about your film here, but I want to kind of go back for just a minute and
Mhm.
if you could tell everybody a little bit about how the project came to be and also
Okay.
what you're doing with it. I want to make sure we get the word out here about your film. So if you
Oh,
could talk a
thank
little
you.
bit about the genesis of it, I'd be curious to hear that.
Okay, so Matt actually plays a role in this, interestingly enough. So I wrote, oh, I just watched it. Anyway, this is embarrassing. Now, hold on. I want to get the name of this film right. So I wrote a film for Matt. I guess did I just write it by myself is what
Is
it's
it
credited.
Scarcity?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
Scarcity.
Yeah, you wrote it by yourself. Yeah.
Okay, so I wrote Scarcity during the pandemic. And I think for some reason we were talking about me writing more short. I don't know how this came about now. It's been 4 years, but I was thinking of writing a separate script. And the idea was that you would be watching TV and then the TV would get mad at you because you're not watching as many older movies anymore and your film knowledge, like the character, not you, Matt's fine with film. Don't worry. This wasn't a criticism. This is actually a criticism of myself, to be honest with you. And the TV's like criticizing, like you used to watch all these old movies and it was the general idea. I don't know if I ever wrote it, but I kept brainstorming this idea of because I felt sort of embarrassed that like I'd done this Wellman series, and I'd done a lot of older films, and then I stopped because older films aren't super popular. I don't people, I'm interested in them, but I even when I see one that's bigger, I can tell people don't want to talk. It's actually a little worse now than it used to be in my mind. But I wanted to talk about that because I did felt when I was getting older, it was getting harder to watch these older films and more interesting films and experiment more with my film knowledge and just like pick up any movie. And I felt sort of sad about that. And then I was like, well, how would I do it? And it sort of morphed into this idea of what the series that Phone Buggin is a part of, Film Rat Video, is, where it's a guy. I kind of wanted to combine that with a video essay series because one of the things and ways I learn more about film knowledge is talking to people, like having a guy I talk to either through you or through other friends. Um, and I felt like I sort of missed that because it was the pandemic and I couldn't do that. And I used to have a job where I could do that with people and learn stuff, and I don't really have that to that degree. Because these were like, I worked at School of Visual Arts. I had Howard Beckerman and all these like titans of film history, like I could talk to, and I just didn't have that anymore. So I missed that, but I also thought that was a great way to learn because I would say one thing and they would say one thing and they would take something from me and I would take something from them. And it was this conversation. And sort of kind of developing it came from that. And I wanted to return to animation. And I liked, and oh, and at the same time, and this is probably a bigger influence on it, the show 12 Ounce Mouse, which is an adult swim show that was made for no money. And I was researching it because I really liked the show and they were coming back for a new season after years and years. And they said, well, we made it all in Final Cut. And I remember sitting there and go, well, I edit on Final Cut. Like I have Final Cut on my laptop. And the more I looked into it, it's like, so I have like at my disposal all the tools to make 12 ounce mouse, like right here with me. Um, and so I was like really thinking about and it's a crappier kind of style of cartoon, which is not popular, probably why I don't get into a lot of film festivals because that's not what people want from animation. But I love, especially the first season, 12 Ounce Mouse is maybe the best follow up to the best parts of David Lynch's Twin Peaks in my mind, but that's just me. Um, and that was always a big influence on me in film school, the show. Um, and I really, really loved it. And I wanted to do kind of a crappier animation. Also because I can't really draw. And so I was using what I think most filmmakers do when they're problem solving, like what can I do with my skills? And that was when I knew I could do is do the lip sync. And so if you watch most of them, they are an essay series. So one is, what are bad movies? And it's to explain the history of bad movies, because the history of bad movies is actually, well, we explain in the short, there have always been bad movies, obviously. But the idea of what bad movies are today started with, I might actually, well, the Golden Turkey Awards book, when they crowned legendarily Plan 9 from Outer Space the worst movie of all time, which happened in like the early late 70s, early 80s. And so based on like that has sort of solidified the idea of watching, although it was around, but I get into the, it's like a whole video where I talk about it. But it was basically talking about how that had solidified and Mystery Science Theater was involved, and how we got to where we are with bad movies up into The Room and what's going on even today. And I'd always wanted to tell that story, because when I explained to people like how we understand, like when Mystery Science Theater did the idea of it was only 10 years old. And I'd seen Joel Hodgson talk in an interview, because I research for Saber Sparks is a YouTube channel. I do research for people. I enjoy doing research, as you can tell from our minds talking about, and this started this and that and that. And I'll love finding a new interview or article or documentary. And so I enjoyed doing that. I did one is, what is genre, to explain what genre is to people, or at least in the film sense. And I kind of also wanted it to be loose, because I was like, if this is a cartoon and cartoons take a very long time and making video essays take a very long time, I kind of loosened it up. So there's one that was about the Akira slide and the references of that, which was a song that I'd wanted to do based on the Elmo slide, which was a song that Elmo did in the early days of YouTube, which I sort of like co-opted and became Akira slide. And then phone bugging, I will probably return to another video essay, because I think people, those are a little easier to get into. But the whole idea is explaining film knowledge, because before this, I think the video Matt helped me on, what is auteur theory, was, I guess, one of my bigger videos. And that helped people, especially during the pandemic, explain what auteur theory was. And I enjoyed explaining, like trying to tell people the kind of the sort of rules of cinema, in a sense, or what these things are, and explain like both what it is, my issues with auteur theory, which I made a second video of. But that sort of made me think I do enjoy doing this and explaining films things and explaining film history to people. Um, and I think that was sort of what it became, because as my kids watch Sesame Street, I enjoy what that show has done and what Jim Henson has done. And I do like making educational content. I don't think I like, there's certain issues I have with, I think educational content is trying to be a little too smart for its own good. So I like to mess with that and play around with it. And I think that's where it all kind of came together, was the idea that I knew some of it worked for me before. I wanted to go back to animation, but also in a promotional, I'm sorry if this is super long or anything.
No, go ahead.
In a promotional sense, what phone bugging from its onset was that I wanted to try, because you can't submit a video essay to a film festival unless you've seen one. I'm unaware of that ever being able to happen. And through kind of the screenings that I did with your films, the few times I got to go to the screening, when the films we work on get to screen, I did feel, other aside from our films, it's not a criticism of the things we work on together. I'd look at the other ones, so it's like, I have stuff like on my YouTube channel that's like sort of better than that one and that one. Like, why don't I could probably do this. And I thought that, but in addition, I did a voice for this thing called Slam Poet, and it came out right when my son was born and I wasn't making as many things. And it kind of showed me that. And I think one thing, being an independent filmmaker, I have this kind of idea of having things work for you when you are not working, basically. Have it work for itself. And that film got into a lot of film festivals. All I did was a voice, but it kept me, people would, when I meet up with people, I'm like, oh, you have this your short's doing pretty well. And I was like, yes it is. And it like kept people reminding them that I do make things, I'm still creative. I associate with animation, all those things. Well, I'm not doing it. I'm just watching a baby, which I should have, that's what you're supposed to be doing. But that very much made me go, need to get more involved in this, because I am proud of these things, and I feel like with YouTube, I'll be proud of certain videos, but it's out and then I'm on to the next one. And I do feel like the how film festivals work and how you can submit, sometimes not, after public, you get about a year or so, but get it, both get my name out there, kind of show off to people that I can make that kind of a thing and get into certain things. I've only gotten to one so far, but um, I don't know, just help promote in a certain sense, because promotion is important, and get it out there and kind of break out while I'm working on the next film route video. This one is, on tour somewhere, helping spread the word, I guess, which I think is a plus for any filmmaker. So sorry, that
Yeah,
was a bit long.
indeed, I agree. And I think that's one of the big benefits of festivals and screenings, whatever that looks like. If it's a one-off screening at a micro cinema or an open film series or whatever, I think there's a lot of opportunities to keep a film, uh, keep it alive, to keep it
Yeah,
out there in front of people. As I always say, it's new to somebody, even if it's been out for a while, it's new to somebody. And you never know where it might connect with the audience that really, gets it and gets into it. I think it's one of the things I kind of learned about from sort of doing my own film festival circuit this past year with Up and Down,
mhm,
the short comedy that I made. It's a chance to meet people. It's a chance to introduce new people to your work that may not find it on YouTube. As we've said, YouTube has gotten so vast that the idea of discovery is, I mean, it's almost an abstract concept at this point. I mean, yes, theoretically, anybody out there could find the film, could see it, but there's so much to sift through that it's
yeah,
the days of you and me connecting because you're looking up films from Towson's film school. I mean, that seems kind of almost quaint by the standards of YouTube today, and that's
yeah,
just how people interact with on the web in general. So I think that festivals, screenings, anything like that, any kind of in-person event is a great way to get the film out, but also to connect with people who are gonna, be on the same wavelength, who kind of vibe with
yeah,
your style and your sensibility and want to see more of what you're doing, or even work and collaborate with you. I mean, there's I think any number of things that can come out of it. But yeah, I think above all, it's just that idea that the film is new to somebody, and I think a lot of festivals, I think smaller festivals in particular, um, are open to showing films that have been out for a couple of years already, and if they feel like it's a good fit, they seem to be open to showing it also, even if it's already out on YouTube. I mean, Up and Down was out on YouTube from the beginning of when I started submitting it to festivals, and there's a lot. I don't think that stigma exists as much. I mean, obviously, yeah, if you're trying to have some sort of big festival premiere, but we're not talking about that. I mean, we're
no,
talking about the kinds of festivals that are going to showcase short films, maybe with a kind of experimental edge to them in some ways, or an offbeat sense of humor, whatever people are going to connect with. There's all sorts of different angles to come at it from. Do you think you're going to continue submitting phone bugging to more festivals? I wasn't entirely sure what that has looked like so far. I know you mentioned you got into one, but do you see this as being something that maybe over the next year you'll continue submitting to more festivals?
I mean, there's some that the submission thing hasn't happened yet. So I guess I've submitted and haven't heard back from, or I mean, they were not going to tell me yet on a bunch of them. I'm going to try to. I, cost is, I did pay for one. I didn't get in for that one. I don't know if I'd spend a ton of money, because I spend that money on making stickers and flyers and
Yeah.
other things to promote, which helps out a bit more. But I am going to try to do that. And hopefully, I used to do public access. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at other things, but it, I would like to continue to do it. And I'm even considering making another just short for the film route video that I could do that with later. Now that, with making videos and writing for other people and kids and a wife and a job and stuff, watch out for 2034. But it's I don't know when that's going to happen, but it is a good way to keep, because phone bugging, it came out in January, and most of my stuff in January people aren't still talking about, but this is a way to keep it alive, which is kind of what I wanted to do with it. Um, but I would like to continue to, and I hope it gets into more. I think if you're doing, the sad thing is if this was live action, I'd probably get into more of them. But animation, how it's perceived, and I go to some of these screenings, it's all like this one stop motion, this one look at the draftsman and look at the design and like, and that's those people are very creative. I'm not saying they don't deserve to be there, but it does stink that if you make something offbeat and weird like that, or the crappy design that I make, uh, people are just not into it, and I think that's unfortunate. But I'm gonna keep trying anyway. So that's
Well, that's
you know.
great. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you're going to keep trying to get it out there. Just to get back to your point, do you feel like animation as a genre tends to get kind of put into a box? Like there's certain types of animation, and if you don't kind of fit neatly into these different categories, it's hard to connect with the audience. It's hard to kind of break through. Is that fair to say?
um it is hard to break through with people because I do feel like, well, I guess I should correct you so nobody says in the comments it's a medium, not a genre. But no, sorry, not to be. However, I do feel like even with animation, when I just recommend a cartoon show that I'm like, this is like Primal was a show that I actually think you would like Primal, Matt. It's about a caveman and his dinosaur, and there's no dialogue, and they just go on crazy caveman adventures, and it's amazing. It's really, really good. I think you would enjoy it. But when I recommend that to people, most people are like, I'm not gonna watch it. And like I think people's view on animation has always been very limited unless it's something that breaks out for a little bit, like Rick and Morty in the last 10 years or something like that. They're very much not as into it. And that's always been disappointing to me because I think some of the best filmmaking and storyboarding and shots can come out of those things. But I think to a lot of them, it's a whole different world and they don't want to get involved, unfortunately, which I find depressing. I do feel like a lot of people, but they're not going to experiment. They're not going to branch out from that. They don't want to get into that world. But I don't know. I've always thought it's a shame because I think to me it's like the same thing. And some of the best filmmaking I saw when this 2 seasons of Primal were out was that show because it was just so visceral and immediate and without dialogue. Like who doesn't do a whole show without? I think there's a little dialogue, but very few. And like no, I also think animation can be experimental in ways that mainstream live action filmmaking can't. And that's something that's always attracted me to it because like even a recent example, like a film like The People's Joker, which is weird and strange and experimental, I've seen some of the reviews and there are people like laughing at it and putting it down. And I'm like, well, I would question those people's media literacy because I think part of it is the story it's telling through those things. And I think that's a part of animation. But I do think one thing animation, especially now, gets to succeed in, whether it's the Midnight Gospel is another example, Primal, um, even the Spider-Verse films, which are huge successes, but are all very experimental, very much pushing visual mediums to a different level. And you can't do those in mainstream Hollywood. Like, and I'm not trying to say blockbusters, I'm just saying like literally anything. Like it's like it just doesn't happen at all to the degree it's happening in animation. And that's been true for a very long time. And they can just like even a SpongeBob episode where they're like, let's just have SpongeBob in a box make noises. Like I can't do that on a big sitcom, but they can open up that like, well, what can we play with in the audio? And it opens up all these theories and I don't know. It's always disappointed me. Sorry, I hope I'm actually answering this question.
Yeah, yeah.
It's always disappointed me how limited people are about animation, but I think if they really got into it, they'd see how much it can expand. It expands the visual medium more so than presently live action. I mean, the fact that when Snow White premiered, Charlie Chaplin was like, I mean, I think it's we're sort of done at this point. Like he was very much like, oh crap, like this is not good. Like, and I don't think like every animated film is better than a live action film at all. I do think but there's a lot more live action film than animation because animation takes so long. But and there is really bad animation, trust me, even in the mainstream sense, but there's a lot of things that I think if people weren't open to, they'd be like, oh my God, like, the fact that now we have several different designs in the same movie is amazing to like that. People used to tell me that was never going to happen. And the Spider-Verse films do that, that we're talking about larger ideas of identity and multiverses the way that I know that sounds boring because all those other stupid live action movies did it, but the when they do it or Primal does it, it reminds me of like when Primal does it, it reminds me of things that like silent film directors did, or when Midnight Gospel does it, it reminds me of experimentation and the beauty in messing with the form and what those images represent. And I don't know. I think, sorry, this is probably verbose and stuff, but I do think people are missing out because there's a lot of great stuff. Not everyone, I would say look for one that's close to what you're interested in, but I think there's a lot of great stuff that you would be surprised at the depth of the emotion and the film theory, to be honest with you, that's on display in some of these things. So I
I
hope
think
I
that's
answered that right.
yeah, I think that that's a great way to put it. Certainly there's a lot of possibilities afforded by the form, and
Mhm.
I think the possibilities are really limitless. I mean, it's just wherever the imagination takes you, and like you said, find what you vibe with, find something you like, and kind of go with it and see where
Yeah.
and seek out more things like it. I think that sounds like a good approach. Don't let it, as with live action film, don't let it get put into little categories and boxes that are going to prevent you from exploring the full range of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've covered a lot of good things tonight. Unless I want to before we end this though, I do want to pull up. I hope you'll indulge me for just a minute. I'm going to pull
Yeah,
up a
sure,
list of
sure.
films we've worked on together, and I don't know how many of these. I know it's probably been quite a while since you've seen some of these. I don't
Yeah.
know if you have any particular favorites, any particular favorite memories of making any of these, like the Wolfman in New York. I think that was the first one that we collaborated on.
Yes. And I
Uh,
remember I felt like we ended up talking about movies longer than we made the movie, but
right.
we did have like I remember seeing that and I was like, oh, I hope we get to do this again. And I remember going to your place in New Jersey to make a few. Detective in New York was a fun, like that was our Sunday, was going to
Yeah,
like
yeah,
when I think of the Unisphere, I think of standing in front of it in the snow. I think I ruined those shoes because we were walking in the snow, which was my fault. I shouldn't have worn those shoes. But I remember ruining the shoes and we were God, it was like we were on the Staten Island ferry, we were on the Unisphere, we are in front of that boat, and I think that was one because we had sort of built up a thing from Wolfman to that. I was very proud of that. I remember doing the scam, which
yeah,
that I think took a whole weekend, and that was maybe I'm wrong about that. That was a lot of fun.
yeah. That was
And
a
then
2 day shoot, I think, for us. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, I had to like really remember lines, and that was anyway. That was man, that was at my old place too. And then
yeah.
Zoe's Guide to Real. I don't know if I could do all 12, to be honest, because there's certain ones I just did a voice real quick. So
Oh yeah,
the
yeah. We
one
don't
the
have to
ones
go
I
through
was
all of it. Yeah,
the ones I was on set for, I definitely remember. The one is it Payback with you and Brooke and I'm hired to kill
yeah, yeah,
you. Yeah, that one. Oh my God. Oh, but the one, you know what? I think the last one we got to, maybe I'm wrong. If correct me if I'm wrong, the last one we got to do all together because you're in Maryland and I'm in New York and stuff. Uh, I felt like that was like kind of the pinnacle acting wise, where is it the Christmas? I'm
yeah.
wearing
Home Invasion or the night before Christmas. Yeah,
that one. I don't know if it comes off that way. It's been a little bit, but that one I felt very kind of protective of because I felt like we really it was our best acting together, possibly.
yeah. It
Um,
was a real different kind of film for us because we had mostly done comedies up to that point. Now, Detective,
yeah.
I guess, wasn't really a comedy, but it didn't have the same. Uh, it didn't have quite the same requirements of like the dialogue and interacting with each other. It was because Detective was just you and the voiceover. And
Yes.
but yeah, Home Invasion was really the one, and the scam, I guess. So that was also that was a thriller, but I remember you were mostly alone in that. It was you with the phone, but yeah, Home Invasion,
Yeah.
like the two of us acting together. Yeah, I thought you did a great job in that. It was a fun shoot. Another long night from what I remember. I think it was sometime in the I want to say it was probably pretty close to Christmas of 2015 that we filmed that. Yeah,
Yeah, and it was
yeah.
I felt like we hit some like I don't know. I felt it got very intense. Like it was like
Mhm.
I was like it was weird because I think we went out to eat later and it I don't know. I don't really get to act like that um too much and it was like it I think because I don't I remember it was like we were just like arguing and now we're eating
Yeah,
burgers
right.
and I talking about like movie and it's like and I was like it's not weird you know Matt's not the character but it was very I don't know but I was like I think I was always very protective of that one because it was like that felt like you know a thing in like later in film school where you like know what you're doing more and I felt like we'd built up this thing but ah
Yeah,
yeah
good times. Yeah,
those were cool. I wish we'd gotten to do more. You know, I don't know.
yeah,
There's always it's always hard because of life and work and all those things. But even though we've done a lot of them, I'm still like, yeah. But I wish we, you know, I'm still we got to do more. And yeah, there's
yeah.
yeah, it's
It was fun times making those for sure.
oh yeah, I loved. I don't know. It was fun making them, and I think I always surprise people like, wait, you're still making stuff, but you guys are still. I'm like, yeah, we're still doing it. Or even
Yeah,
for Forbidden Frames, I think people are like, you know, surprised. Although that I really I do quite enjoy that movie. That was
yeah.
yeah,
I was
that
really glad we could get you in there. Yeah, the voice of that police monitor system that shows up at
yeah.
the door. Yeah, yeah.
I'm excited for Cinema Detective, and I like this whole like the thing you got going now. I think it's like a cool idea, but it almost feels more realistic because I feel like older films, it's getting harder and harder to get people into them. And I know you and I have said this so many times outside, like years and years ago. Like I feel like every year we're like, it's getting harder and harder to get people into 40s movies or silent movies. And it feels like it does, but I do feel like part of it gets into my own paranoia about that it's harder to talk about film history that's not part of like the films that are of the moment or talked about or you know get screened every year or stuff like that and that I don't know I don't think this is how you're taking it you're talking largely more about censorship and things like that
Oh yeah,
which is
and right, and Forbidden Frames. Yeah,
yeah
it's a dystopian satire
yeah
on
but
censorship. Yeah.
which I do think about now actually because of everything that's going on with TikTok I'm just like
Oh yeah.
that could really that's very scary that whole thing and that it actually your film I was reminded of your film when that I mean, I guess it passed and they have a year, but which is depressing. But I, you know, it. I think you're onto something, maybe with that. But I liked all the discussions with you and was it Chris? I think
Cullen. Yeah.
Cullen. Okay,
Yeah.
very wrong about that. But I liked all those discussions, and there was a couple about. I actually wrote down a bunch of the films. Kind of reminded me when I saw Personal Journey of Martin Scorsese the first time. I actually rewatched it to write down everything. And I rewatched one of the things you're talking about someone capturing New York, and I have it written down somewhere. And I've been meaning to see that movie ever since, and I forget which one it's called. But there were there's certain ones I just found very fascinating how you guys were talking about. I like those discussions a lot. And it helped me get through when I first got COVID. Oops, sorry.
Oh right.
But yeah, because it took me a minute to watch it, and I was like, well, I'm just here in this hotel room, so I'm gonna watch this. And I was like, I was very inspired by like what you did, and also reminded me of Alphaville a bit because I think it's hard to do a sci-fi film on a budget and make it convincing. You know, as a Mystery Science Theater fan, trust me, I know. But it reminded me more of Alphaville than it reminded me of a Mystery Science Theater movie. So in a positive sense,
Well, that's good to hear.
you know. But yeah,
Oh
you did it.
yeah.
I like that movie. I'm excited for Cinema Detective, and
Yeah.
if this franchise does anything else, I don't know.
Yeah. We got Cinema Detective coming out May 2nd, and Yeah, and then we'll see where we go from there. I've got one more in the another film in the works starting in July, but I'll tell you about that at another time.
Okay.
Yeah, so anyway, I really enjoy hearing your, talking with you again tonight and hearing about phone bugging and all your thoughts that have, I guess, both led up to that film and come out of it, and
Hmm.
uh, hearing about your other projects. Before we sign off here, is there anything else that you would like to say, and anything you'd like, any projects you'd like to plug, any links that you'd like to mention? I'll of course put anything like that in the description of the video as well. But if there's anything you'd like to plug, now would be the time.
Oh, okay. I have my YouTube channel. I post probably too much, but I post as often as I possibly can, which is gets hard, but I do. I would say that is the best place. If you're on Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, I have a Facebook fan page, and I have a TikTok, but most of it is all run through my YouTube channel. But if you want to learn more about any of my other stuff or hear me talk about everything from movie news to reviews to the X-Men cartoon to everything, it's all really on my YouTube channel. That's made, or even when I make short films, they all go up there. It's sort of my, my main personal output of creativity, I guess.
Great. So go check it out, subscribe, and follow Jim's new videos over on YouTube. And
Well,
all
thank
right,
you
I
for
think
having
that
me.
covers. I think that about covers it. So thanks again for talking with me tonight. It was great having you on here, and
Well, thanks for letting me
best of
on. It's
yeah,
cool.
sure thing. Best of luck with your with phone bugging and future projects.
No, thank you.
All right, talk to you later.
See ya.